Welcome back to Round the Cauldron, where we talk theology, philosophy, and everyday life as a modern witch. If you like the show, please leave a review wherever you listen to help other witches find me. Don't forget, you can help support the show at patreon.com/roundthecauldron for as little as $1 a month and get patron-exclusive content. If you're ready to hop into the show, grab some coffee, pull up a seat, and join me round the cauldron. Today, I have a special guest on. We are going to be talking to Hope. Hope is a 20-year-old self-proclaimed tarot expert based in Virginia, and she is here to have a chat with us today. Okay, everyone, so this is Hope. I'm here with Hope today. Say hi.
Hello, hello, hello.
So I actually met Hope through email. You reached out to me through email and you wrote a guest post on my blog about cleansing and charging your tarot decks.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to give an introduction to yourself, like who you are, anything that you want to say?
Sure. Hello there. I'm Hope. I'm 20 years old. I'm currently in college to study how to be a teacher. So that's my big passion right now. I've been doing tarot cards for about 2 years. Really started focusing on them about 2 months ago. I've practiced witchcraft. I've done that for about 2 months. And I am pagan. I've been that for about 2 months. It's been a crazy couple months for me.
Yeah, so you're a little bit of a baby everything. Baby witch, baby pagan. That's so awesome.
We all start somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's interesting to me because I'm almost 10 years older than you, which makes me sound really old, but I remember being in your shoes. But I got my start, oh my gosh, I was like 12 or 13. So that was a long time ago. We'll just go with that.
Well, I've always been interested in witchcraft, and back in high school, I started to try and pick it up, but I come from a very Christian background.
Mm-hmm.
My family's, not my parents, my grandparents, I had to go to church every Sunday. We worked for the church. It was very religious. So I wasn't ready to really touch it yet. So I've had knowledge for a while, but I've only accepted who I am recently.
That's a very common theme that I see a lot, even within myself and a lot of other pagans and even just witches in general, is that Christianity seems to be the foundation. And it reminds me of the reverse tower card, where
Yes.
everything, you're breaking through that shaky foundation that you were built upon and finally realizing your full potential and who you are and what you believe.
And let me tell you, that is a beautiful, beautiful feeling. When
It
you finally
is.
realize who you are and what you want to do, it's truly beautiful.
It is. I totally agree with you. So you said you have your background, essentially you were raised Christian, as a lot of us are. So once you found essentially who you are as a person, how did you feel about that? And how did you start to, dig deeper into that sort of feeling?
Reading. What I did is I went out of my way to research everything I could find. I've always felt to pull towards the Greek pantheon and paganism for that aspect. So my research was first into very much Greek mythology because that's what I grew up with. So what I did and what I recommend for anybody else starting, research. You want to know everything you can possibly know so you don't make a mistake. Mistakes are common. They are fine most of the times, but it's always good to know what you're doing.
Right. Well, and mistakes are part of the learning process.
Exactly.
I don't want anybody to think that going into this, they should be afraid to mess up, because I've been doing this for so long and I still mess up, and it's okay. I mean, I did a whole episode one time and I called it "I'm a Bad Witch," but I called it "I'm a Bad Witch" because sometimes I forget that there is a celebration coming up until like maybe 4 days before, or when the full moon is.
I remember my first spell I ever did, I cast a circle and then I walked out of the circle because I forgot an item.
So you didn't cut your door?
No. I walked out, went out to the backyard, grabbed my item, came back into my circle. And then I was like, oh gosh.
Oh, I'm sure we've all been there before. It's okay. So that makes me feel like you sort of got your start within witchcraft in that aspect, within Wicca, because I know circle casting is very well, for me, it correlates especially with Wicca. I don't really cast circles anymore, because my witchcraft goes more along with my Irish paganism and not Wicca. So did you get a start within Wicca and you've sort of branched out from there?
Well, when I was first researching witchcraft, all I could find was Wicca. And for the longest time, I thought witchcraft was Wicca. I thought that
Yeah.
was the same term, which it's not. For those of you who don't realize that, witchcraft is an art. Wicca is more of a religion.
Right.
So I went into it thinking that's what Wicca was, but when I was doing it, it didn't feel right because I'm personally not a follower of the divine moon goddess or the horned god. So for me, it never felt quite right until I realized, wait, I can do this and not be Wiccan.
Right.
So I cast a circle because the first spell I ever did, which was to take negativity out of my household, said to cast a circle. And I thought, okay, if they know what they're doing. And I haven't actually done it since after I messed up. Casting circle, I'd only do that for a very powerful spell. One that has a big intention, and things I do are like protection spells and candle spells. So I don't really need to cast a circle.
Yeah, I feel like the only time I would do something like casting a circle would be if I needed to contain a lot of energy for a very specific reason. Otherwise, I see people casting circles as a form of energetic protection. I'm like, okay, but what are you protecting yourself from? I don't understand. But that's just me and how I view witchcraft and magic.
Well, my thoughts on casting a circle for things like that, I would just use a sigil, personally. I'm very into sigil craft and making things like that. So I wouldn't even do that. I would cast a sigil, but like I said, that's my opinion. I don't cast circles. After I messed up that one time, I haven't touched it because I'm too embarrassed to touch it again.
Well, you shouldn't be embarrassed. You shouldn't be embarrassed. If you feel like casting a circle, cast your circle. We all mess up. It's fine.
That was my most memorable error because I was in my backyard and I just screamed, "Oh no!"
That happens. I think I've only cast a circle maybe a handful of times in my practice. It's just not something that I feel required to do, I guess. So you got your start with Wicca, and then where are you now? What are you looking into now?
Well, when it comes to research-wise, I'm actually researching a lot of chakras right now. But overall, I've gone from Wicca and I am a Kemetic pagan, which means I work with the Egyptian gods. I do a lot of basic witchcraft. I'm starting to branch out from Kemeticism and work with other gods from other pantheons, but so I don't really do labels for that. I just say I'm a witch. Because at the end of the day, no matter what I believe in, I practice witchcraft that makes me a witch.
Okay. So you don't do labels, you mean like in terms of soft polytheism versus hard polytheism?
Yes, I don't go with the label, I'm Kemetic, I'm Wiccan. I don't follow any of those big religious kind of labels right now. I just say I'm pagan.
Okay, that makes sense. So as far as, I don't want to push you to label yourself, but as far as the pantheons, you don't limit yourself to just one. Right now you're looking into multiple. Okay.
Right now I work with Mercury from the Roman pantheon and Anubis, who's my patron god from the Egyptian pantheon. So I'm kind of all over the place.
Okay. No, that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding that right before I said something that was completely wrong. Because myself, I am a hard polytheist, but I'm also, there's a word for it. Oh my gosh. I'll remember what it is later. It starts with an H, but it's essentially like, I believe in my gods, but that doesn't mean I don't believe yours are real.
That's how I am. That's exactly how I am. Okay. I work with my gods, but I believe the other ones are there.
Okay. I know there's a word for it, and I will think of it eventually.
So yeah, I work a lot with Anubis and Mercury right now, but I have worked with gods like Cernunnos in the past.
Okay. That's really interesting. And I think it's good for new pagans or new witches in general to branch out and really get a feel for everything around them. Because when I first started exploring paganism in general outside of Wicca, I was very fascinated with the Greek pantheon, but I don't think it was a fascination of like feeling called to them. It was more of a fascination of, this is what's familiar to me, because those deities are, I mean, there's books written about them that are modern, and their mythology is widely known. So I think it was just something that I researched and looked into because it was something that I was already familiar with. Whereas,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and right now, um, moving into Irish paganism, this is where I feel called to, but it's also very overwhelming for me because it's an area that I know almost nothing about. And the mythology from Ireland is, the majority of it is written or was written by Christian monks. And so there's a lot of it that you kind of have to read between the lines of what they're saying versus what was actually happening. And then a lot of the manuscripts were lost. So it's sort of, we're having to fill in the blanks and get outside of the idea of Celtic paganism, because the Irish culture is a living culture, whether or not the Catholic people in Ireland realize that what they're doing has pagan roots. So
Well,
that's, go ahead.
I know for me personally, I went into Greek mythology first because when I was a child, my mother would read Greek myths to me as bedtime stories. So I went into it thinking, if I'm pagan, I have to go with the Greek pantheon because that's what I know. And it took me 2 months to accept that Anubis was my patron god because I know nothing about Egypt. So it was very much, I'm working with you. No, you're not. Yes, I am. No, you're not. A lot of pushing at first.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And especially it can be difficult when it's a pantheon that you're not really familiar with. Because I mean, my knowledge of the Egyptian pantheon is Ra and Anubis. That's basically it. I don't know anything else. And it's not something that we're really taught here in the United States. We're not taught a lot, but that's a whole nother topic.
What we're taught in the United States is Greek mythology and Roman mythology, and that's it. For those of you not in the United States.
Yeah, we're very sheltered, in my opinion, when it comes to outside cultural influence.
So, if we were talking labels, I do associate a lot more with a divination type of witch.
Okay.
Because I do a lot of divination in my practice. I use pendulums, I Ching, runes, tarot, oracle cards, lot throwing. You name it, I've studied it.
Okay. So how does the divination play a part in your witchcraft then? Because for me, they're two sort of separate practices and they don't always work hand in hand. I know they can, but how does that work for you?
Well, for a lot of the smaller spells I do, I use it for divination purposes. So I have a jar spell that is strengthening my spiritual powers. And I have candles that are purple just for spiritual abilities and good luck. Okay. So a lot of my minor spells are around either controlling my third eye or unlocking my third eye.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Because I know there are some witches out there who use the imagery of tarot within their spells. It's not something I've ever experimented with, I guess, on my own. Is that something that you've thought about doing?
I've done a few love spells using like the Lover's card, but overall not very often, mostly because I'm scared I'm going to mess my cards up. And tarot cards are expensive. For those of you who don't know, they can be expensive, so I don't want to get wax on a card.
Oh yeah, no, I don't blame you. But for anybody who doesn't have a tarot deck, I just gave this tip to someone on Instagram. The art from the Rider-Waite deck is now out of copyright, and the cards, all of the cards are on Wikipedia, and you can actually print them and use them yourself if you cannot afford a deck of your own. Just so you know.
You're telling me to go buy cardstock.
Well, I mean, if you want to, but you can use regular paper too if you really don't have cardstock. Or you can use tarot apps.
Yeah, I use an app called Labyrinthos where they teach you the cards and they do free daily learnings and they have cards that they sell. So that's what I do. But yeah.
So how do you feel about the electronic version of these tarot apps? I know for me, I don't care either way, but there are some people who are like, no, they're horrible. And some people are like, no, they're great. So how do you feel about them since they're electronic?
It's a love-hate relationship. I love the fact that it makes it more open to the normal person, that more people are learning about it and want to research it more. I love that it's making it a more available resource.
Mhm.
However, I personally don't trust the readings that they give online because to me it feels like they've been programmed that day for everybody.
Okay, that makes sense. But do you feel like they give accurate information on a card by card basis? So
Yeah.
not necessarily like a reading, but this is what this card means, this is what this card means.
Oh, I swear by my online resources. If I don't know a card, I'm Googling it. Like, what does the Ace of Cups mean again?
Yeah.
I swear by it. So yes, I love that it's becoming more open to everybody. I love that a normal person can go out and be like, I wonder what the Hierophant means. And they can go find tradition and conformity in 20
Mhm.
seconds. That's amazing to me.
Yeah. So how did you come to figure out that paganism is the right path for you? And then after that, what advice would you give to anyone else who's trying to figure out if this is the right path they should take?
Well, funny story. When I was a kid, I read Percy Jackson a lot. So I was already into mythology, and I used to go to church with my grandparents, and while we were doing the prayers, I'd be in my head apologizing to Zeus. So yeah. So I've always been very drawn to it. What made me realize it was the path for me was when I realized that there's something I believe in the world that isn't covered by the main three religions. I believe there's more going on out there than those have been able to show me. And once I realized that, I looked into paganism and something in my soul just told me it felt right. It's one of those things where when you know, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, I hear a lot of pagans, new and old, say that it felt like home.
Exactly. And what I would say for beginner pagans, don't be afraid of who you are. It's okay. There are more people like you out there. You're not insane for thinking this. You're not going crazy for thinking that you have meditated and seen the gods or given offerings to them. You're not insane. It is okay. There are people out there. There are resources. There are communities.
Yes, yes. We're here.
And it doesn't matter what age you start.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
you can be 16 or 34 or 64. It's okay. You'll still be accepted. Another thing I would want to go over or think is important for a new pagan to know is working with the deity is a lot of responsibility. You don't just get to say, I like you. We can talk once every 3 months.
Mhm.
That's not how it works.
Right.
There's constant prayers, constant offerings, constantly speaking with them. It's like having a roommate. You see them, you work with them 24/7. That communication always has to be there.
Right. I think in my experience, I would liken it more to having having a boss.
Mm.
Not necessarily a roommate, but because in my working with and my worship and honor of Briege, it's more of like I'm doing all of these things. These are the things that I'm supposed to be doing. And these are the guidelines that have been set for me. And these are the requirements that I have been given. And then, she reciprocates and offers protection or healing or sometimes that kick in the butt that I need to get things done. It's it can be seen as a symbiotic relationship, but one has more power than the other, right? Like she doesn't need me.
And that is absolutely true. Working with a god, another thing you'd want to research for you new pagans is the rules of the religion or the rules of the pantheon. So I know that there's certain pantheons where they have very specific guidelines. Like for Egypt, it's the 42 laws of Ma'at. There's very important things you have to do, very important steps that need to be done. You want to research that and you don't want to offend the deity because
Right.
they have they have feelings like you and me.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do something that'll make them mad, you'll know.
Right. And one thing that's familiar in that aspect too, just that I know from my own research into the Greek pantheon, is that there is a very specific layout of the way things have to go before an offering can be given. You have to have the procession, you have to have the cleansing, you have to have the kernips, I think is what it's called, cleansing of the miasma. There's so much that goes into it. So it's not necessarily something that you can just walk right into. And in my own experience, it took me, several months of giving offerings to Briege and saying, this is for you, and, please accept my offering, but I want nothing in return. You should have no expectations going into attempting to work with a deity, because they can say no to you. I mean,
absolutely.
If my Bealtaine ritual is anything, I was told no, basically, and that's just gonna happen. So that's something that you need to be prepared for too. And like you said, it's a lot of responsibility, and it's not something that you can just go into and do it once and then call it good, and then call on that god or goddess every time you want to do a spell and expect them to help you.
Yes. And another thing to note for you new pagans, it's okay if a god doesn't just go and say, I choose you. Not always what happens, and don't feel any less than or not as good as another pagan, because I know I went into paganism. I asked Apollo to work with me because I have been drawn in since I was a child, and he said, haha, no.
Right. Well, and I feel like there's this big idea within the pagan community. It's like a mask that is put forth. All you see are those good moments, and these people who are saying that they are speaking with a deity and they feel this deity's presence and they were called by a deity. But you don't hear those times when that didn't happen. And the times that it doesn't happen far outweigh the times that it does. Because in my opinion, the gods have more important things to worry about than us puny humans here on Earth. So I agree. You should not feel bad or feel down on yourself or feel like you're doing something wrong because you don't feel like you're being called by a deity, or you don't feel like you can hear them speaking to you, because it doesn't always happen. I feel like it's put forth as the norm. Like, it's normal for that to be happening to every single pagan. But it's not normal. It's not what happens all the time. So it's okay if it doesn't happen to you. It doesn't make you any less of a pagan or any less of a witch.
Exactly. It's normal. I would say you're a little more likely to go looking for a god and not have them find you than go walk in and they're like, hey buddy, how you doing?
Right. Yeah, I totally
because
get
like
that.
you said, they are gods, we are humans. They do not really care what we're doing 24/7. You have to earn their attention.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like for anyone that's listening who that's all they see out there, just remember that what you see on social media, what you see on YouTube and Instagram, that is the best part of someone's life. You don't see the bad things. You don't see the times where, they were told no, or they messed up, or they were rejected. You don't typically see those. And it's something that I feel like as a larger community, we need to talk more about.
Absolutely. I remember my first ritual to Anubis. I cried because I was like, I'm so scared I am wrong. And it's okay to be afraid that you're wrong. Everybody goes through that stage of, oh my gosh, what am I doing? That's normal. Don't worry too much about it. And honestly, the biggest thing I would say for a beginner pagan is research. Don't go throwing yourself at a god who you do not have what it takes to handle. Such as if you are very against marriage, you hate it, you're not a person who thinks that, maybe working with Hera isn't the best idea for you. So research the deities, research what they believe in, research their flaws as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because the deities aren't like God, the Christian God, where he's perfect in every way. They have flaws. So if you find a God and you start working with them and you realize their flaw is something you can't handle, you've done this to yourself. You need to research and look into them.
Right. Like, if you can't handle the idea of adultery, maybe don't reach out to Zeus.
Yeah.
Zeus and his many, many children.
So,
but then in that respect, I feel like we also can't hold the gods to the human standard, because we're not on the same level. And there was a conversation that I read many, many years ago about this idea, and it really made a lot of sense. And it's something that, reading their mythology and their history and the way they were traditionally worshipped or honored, if you have access to that information, is a great idea. But don't just go into Google and type in Aphrodite, go into Google Scholar or sacred texts and find good, accurate information, because there's a lot of crap out there too.
So basically those skills you learned in high school where you have to judge a author's bias, you have to do that again for this.
Yes.
Because you can come across a source that says Aphrodite loved her husband Hephaestus. And then if you don't research it, you're going to believe that, even though that is very much not the truth.
Right.
So research is your best friend. Always, if you look at a source, always double check it against another source, cross-reference it.
Right.
Not just say, this site looks legit, I'm going to trust it. No, if there's something in there that you're like, this is important, I need to know this, double check it somewhere else.
Right. Even what you hear on my YouTube channel or my podcast, I always tell everyone, don't take my word for it. Go to the sources that I link in the description and in the show notes, and then go look at other sources. Don't take my word as fact, because I'm human and I might be wrong, and maybe the source that I have isn't as great as I thought it was.
And another thing, just because a book is published does not mean it is a fail-safe.
Right. Oh my gosh. I'm not going to lie. Like, when I was first looking into Wicca and witchcraft in my early teens, I was like, oh, they published it in a book. The publishers, they check this stuff, that it's got to be accurate. Nope, not happening. And I have since learned, over trial and error and many years of experience, that just because it's in a book doesn't make it true, and that publishers don't always check this stuff unless they are legally obligated to.
Yes, so don't take everything you read with a grain of salt. Everything.
Yeah.
Google Scholar is your best friend. If you're in college, your school's database, your best friend.
Yep. And JSTOR, for those that don't know, I'll leave the link in the description and in the show notes, but JSTOR has opened up, I think, for 100 free articles a month for anyone, regardless of whether or not you're in university or if your university has access to JSTOR. It's essentially a very large collection of peer-reviewed academic material, and it is amazing. There's also another free resource, academia.edu. It's not as good as those that have peer-reviewed information, but it's a good starting point. And while we're on this topic, please never ever use Wikipedia as a primary source.
Another thing I would like to say for new pagans that I feel is very important to me personally, research the religion and make sure it's not a closed religion.
Right. Yeah.
There are some religions out there, for those of you who don't know, which they don't accept outsiders. Maybe it's because of a culture thing where you could not ever quite understand it as well, or because of the way that they were treated over the years. Like Native American cultures are very closed, and Zoroastrianism is very closed. Do not touch a culture you don't have a right to touch.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not okay.
Yeah, and I feel like that's something that's missed a lot with new pagans, is I feel like they might get overwhelmed with the amount of information that is available to them, that maybe that's not something that they take into account. And I'm not gonna lie, I feel like the majority of the people who are doing things like this, whether it's out of ignorance or they just don't care, is white people. But there's a good reason for that. And I feel like it's because, especially if you grew up in the United States, I'm not sure if you feel this way, but I feel very disconnected with culture.
Yes.
Because I'm in the United States and because I am a white woman, I don't really have like a cultural connection. And so I feel like a lot of new pagans see that, especially if they are white, and they're like, oh my gosh, there's culture now. and something that they felt like they were missing, they can find it in these other cultures. But historically, there are cultures we're not welcome because of colonization and because of the things that happened. And that may not be my fault personally, because I was born in 1991 and I had nothing to do with any of that. But it is the responsibility that I do have because of my ancestors.
Exactly.
And I feel like that's something that needs to be talked about more too. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be talked about more that baby pagans need to have access to.
So when you're looking into a religion or you find a God that really clicks with you, Google the religion. Say, is blank a closed religion? Or look up a list of closed religions. Because I know before I was pagan, I knew you weren't really welcome in Pacific Islander or Native American cultures. I had no idea Zoroastrianism was off limits.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea. But then I researched. I cannot stress this enough. Research is your best friend.
Yeah.
But
And there's a lot of stuff too that's initiatory that you might think that you have all the information, but if you're not initiated, you have no idea if what you're doing is right. And there is a section in Althea Sebastiani's new book where she lays it out really well. And essentially it's like you're taking that aspect and divorcing it from the cultural context. And so it really loses all meaning if you take it out of its own context and use it for your own personal whatever it is that you're doing.
And there's also some religions, like you said, where you initiate, where you have to learn from a person involved, like voodooism or hoodooism. You can't just walk into that.
Right. Yeah.
So for new pagans, always make sure you're not appropriating a culture you have no right to.
Yeah.
And especially for another thing with that is another reason other than appropriation and respect, gods from those religions are known to not be very nice to outsiders who try to mess with them.
Right. And there was an argument on Twitter. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you just don't want to upset a god from a religion you have no right to and make maybe the hoodoo goddess of water mad at you. You don't want to do that.
Right. Yeah. There was a conversation on Twitter where I don't know if I can find the link. I'll try. But a white lady was messing with a religious aspect that she knew nothing about. Well, she ended up dying. And some people are saying, well, she shouldn't have touched what she knew nothing about. And some people are saying, well, she can do whatever she wants. But the culture that she was interacting with is a culture that her ancestors did harm to.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can imagine going to a deity and saying, hey, I want to work with you. Oh, by the way, my ancestors were partially responsible for the enslavement of your people, but that's okay.
I didn't do it.
Right. No, that's not going to go over well.
They have a long memory.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
With certain things, even if you've got like the culture aspect where you can be part of it, there's also the people aspect. Maybe for some religions, some from different continents, you need to understand the language to understand the importance of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
a lot can get lost in translation.
Yes, so very much appropriation comes in so many ways in witchcraft that it's not spoken about and people don't want to talk about it. But as a new witch or a new pagan, it's your responsibility to research it. And it's hard to research something nobody wants to talk about, like cultural appropriation in witchcraft and paganism, but you have a responsibility not only as a new witch, but as a decent human being to research and find out, am I okay to use this? Can I use white sage if I'm not Native American? Do I have an okay to that? Can I pray to this god if I'm not from this culture? It's your responsibility to look into that.
Yeah. And if you can't find accurate information, ask. There's nothing wrong with reaching out to someone who is of that culture or who practices that faith and asking them. However, keep in mind that they do not have an obligation to answer you. They can tell you to buzz off. It is not their responsibility to educate you. But it never hurts to ask.
And there's always the point that you need to know is, which I've had the hardest time accepting personally, is you're never going to know everything about the gods or the religion you're working with. There's so much information that for some religions and some paganism aspects, thousands and thousands of years of information.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to know all of it.
Yeah.
And that's okay. As long as you're trying your hardest and you are able to admit when you don't know it, it's okay.
Yeah, that's something that I struggle with too, honestly, just because going from Wicca to Irish paganism and realizing how much I actually don't know, that's been one of the hardest things, because I am a very scholarly person, I want to say. I enjoy the academic side of looking into all of this, and now I am struggling because a lot of the resources are not in English. They're in Irish, and I am struggling to learn the language. Did you know that it's really difficult to learn a language at 28 years old? To learn an entirely new language?
I'm sure. And speaking from experience working with an Egyptian god,
Yeah.
And then if you find really good documents, you're never, unless you're in a museum, you're never going to find the actual document it came from, because it's in hieroglyphics. Do you speak hieroglyphics? Because
Right.
I speak hieroglyphics, and the thing they used to translate it was Greek. Do you speak Greek? Because I don't speak Greek.
Right.
So when it comes to the language aspect, you're always, with paganism in general and witchcraft, what I believe, and I'm sure you agree too, you're always going to learn.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
always new to learn. You never know everything.
Yeah. And you never stop learning, and you should never, if you ever get to a point where you're like, yeah, I'm cool, I know everything, you're in trouble, because there is always something new that you can learn, or something that you can deepen your understanding of.
Absolutely. There's thousands and thousands of resources, so much to comb through. People literally get PhDs and spend their lives studying this stuff and still don't know everything.
Yeah. Good on them.
There's no way I know as much as a 60-year-old who had a PhD for 50 years would know.
Yeah. Not happening.
No way. And this is actually, I have something I'd want to say to new witches. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Dollar Tree's your best friend. You do not need, you're going to see a lot of resources when you do this research online saying you need X crystal and Y crystal and this herb only found in South India. Most things you can use clear quartz and basil.
Or rosemary.
Or rosemary, and you'll be fine. So magic is fluid. As long as you have the intent and the true belief that you want this to work, 9 times out of 10, with what resources you have, it'll understand and work with it. Because I know I have 3 candles. 3 of them I have 2 candles that are white and 1 that's purple. And I have a Yankee candle, and that's it. And that's okay.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. You don't need to have absolutely everything, especially if you're just starting out, because in my opinion, you're just going to end up wasting a bunch of money on stuff that you're never going to use.
Mm-hmm. So spend some time researching your craft, researching the things you don't have to specialize, but things that you feel more comfortable, and then find the resources that are good for that. Like, if you're like me where you do a lot of candle magic, I'm going to spend more money on candles than I will herbs.
Mm-hmm.
And always find a correspondence chart. Correspondence charts are your friend. They're charts, for those of you who don't know, it's a chart that says, you need citrine, you can use carnelian. You need peridot, use green aventurite. You want this, just use quartz. Quartz can be used for everything, just use quartz. So find those charts and trust your instincts. That is the biggest thing that you need to do, is trust yourself, which you have to be in the right state of mind for a spell to work. So you need to trust your abilities for it to work in the first place. And never be afraid to use your own spell. As long as you sit there and you truly think of how can it go wrong and how will I deal with if something goes wrong in my spell, you can create your own. That's the next level of witchcraft that you can unlock that. I'm using gamer terms here, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I mean, it's relevant and relatable. It makes sense. You can level up your witchcraft that way.
Yeah, level up your witchcraft. Stuff that you find from trustworthy sources. Once you have gained enough experience points, you can start making it, and that's okay. And it's okay if a spell doesn't work immediately. Not every spell is a boom. You want money? Here's $100 the next day.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's an entirely different, deeper topic that we can just go down a rabbit hole of writing your own spells and putting in time parameters and how it's going to work. And that's a whole, like, we could talk for hours about that.
Like we started this podcast saying there's a lot of information out there.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, mostly trust your gut. That's my biggest thing for new pagans and new witches. Trust your gut.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. So is there anything that you want to end this on? Anything final that you want to say?
It's okay to be wrong. Never go through witchcraft thinking I have to be right or everything's going to go wrong. If I don't get this exact thing quote right while I'm saying this spell, my house is going to burn down. That's not going to happen. It's okay to be wrong. That's part of growing. And as a human, we're constantly changing. So we are constantly growing, and you're going to make mistakes. That's being human. That's what makes us human. Ability to accept our mistakes. So don't feel bad if you're wrong. I know I'm wrong all the time.
I've been doing this for over a decade and I still get it wrong sometimes. It's okay.
So thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on. We'll have to do it again.
Absolutely.
Do you want to let everybody know where they can find you online and what you do online?
So I am a Twitch streamer and I do Instagram and Twitter. You can find me at SneaksReading, SNEAKS reading. I do free tarot readings online, and I teach about basic witchcraft and basic tarot to people who want to learn more because it's kind of my thing. So if you ever need a lesson or something you want to know, feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah, and I will leave all of those links in the description and in the show notes below for anyone that wants to go enjoy your content, which I highly encourage everyone to do. It's always a great thing to broaden your horizons and get the perspective of other witches and other pagans. So thank you again, Hope, so much for joining me on here. And for everyone else, we will see you next time.
Bye
for now. So I hope you all enjoyed that little conversation that we had with Hope. You can find her at Twitch, Instagram, and Twitter. I will leave all of those links in the description below. And for podcast listeners, those links will be in the show notes. As always, I want to give a big shout out to my patrons over on Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you, Jess, and thank you, Rose, at wiccanhomestead.com. If you want to help support my channel, give this video a thumbs up and make sure that you're subscribed. You can also head over to patreon.com/roundthecauldron and help out for as little as $1 a month. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.